For most gardeners, weeding is a least favorite activity. It's a necessary activity though, and if you put a little bit of technique into your weeding when you first get your soil, that will set yourself up for success down the road. So we did a fair amount of landscaping here at my own greenhouse demo garden this year, and I had some garden mix soil brought in from a reputable landscape company. But even with a reputable company, there's just no way to get weed-free soil. So although my garden had previously been more or less weed-free after a decade of tending it, I am confronted this year with some weeds that I haven't had in the past. So I'm going to show you my technique for weeding as efficiently as possible so that in future years I spend more time enjoying and growing and less time weeding. So here are my top recommendations. If you just have a little bit of time in a day, just a couple minutes, don't bother trying to weed everything. Find a plant, find a weed that is about to bloom, that's got some blossoms on it, or some seed heads. Pull that one immediately, put it in your compost or your refuse. If you've got home compost, I wouldn't put it in there because it probably wouldn't get hot enough to kill the seeds. But if you have municipal compost, then I would say put it in there, unless it's a noxious or prohibited weed, in which case put it into your refuse. So that's my number one tip. If you just have 30 seconds, pull whatever you see that has a blossom on it. And just do that every day, every other day. And that way they're not gonna go to seed and you'll pull them up by the roots and you won't have to deal with them again next year. Speaking of roots, here's my tips for weeding. If it has rained, that's the time for sure that you want to get out and weed, or do it after you have watered in your garden. It hasn't rained here in a while, so I'm just out pulling up plants that are new to the garden. And so my recommendation is don't pull from the top. What I do is I swing around the plant with my fingers until I'm right where the plant meets the soil, and I grab it and pull it up and try to get as much root as possible. Not much there. Here's an elm. There's 1,000 elm seeds at Edmonton in every garden. Here's some plantain. So although this is a nutritious plant and can be used medicinally, there's a lot of it in the garden now that came in with this fresh soil. So I'm just gonna pull it up. There are some kinds of grass that you can get under, grab right at the base where it meets the soil, give it a pull, and you should be able to get all of the roots. Quackgrass is an exception to that. It is almost impossible to pull up quackgrass. Some has popped up in a raised bed that I have here. It's a bugger. Quackgrass. Ugh. Here's a pigweed that has a little bit of seed on it. Glad I saw that before it started to spread itself. The trick with going underneath the leaves and getting right at the soil means you're putting most of the pressure on the stem to get it to release. And if you are confronted with something like thistle, you're actually getting underneath the prickly parts, and it doesn't hurt as much when you do it. You could wear gloves. And I would say that the more I garden, the older I get, the more calloused my fingers get, and the more tolerant I am of the prickle from a thistle. So just a few seconds here has netted me quite a handful of weeds. I just tend to do a little section every day, and the weeds progress, there's no doubt about that. But because I stay on it every day, I'm able to catch them. As soon as they get big enough to pull, I get my fingers there and pull them out. And by next year's garden, things should be looking pretty good. And I'll